Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the Sofa. My name's Paul if you're new here, and if you're not new here, well, my name's still Paul. Now, today we have a very special show with very special guests. Myself, as well as Shayna, who helps me out with things. We recently sat down with Aphrodite Jones and Cindy Best to discuss Aphrodite's book, Levi's Eyes. Levi's Eyes is a first-hand look into the twisted world of Karl Karlsen and his atrocious crimes against not only his own son Levi, but also his first wife Christina. Now, Cindy Best was Karl Karlsen's second wife, and she would be instrumental in bringing him to justice. Now, Aphrodite Jones goes without saying. Many of you probably know who I'm already talking about by just the name. She's a New York Times bestselling author. She's an amazing victims advocate, and she has her own hit TV series, True Crime with Aphrodite Jones. Now, Aphrodite also had unprecedented access to Karl Karlsen. She was able to interview him for 2 years from his jail cell in California. Not only did she have that, but she had the added layer of them being able to consult with Cindy to sort through the many stories, the many lies, the many lives of Karl Karlsen. Now, we're reading Levi's Eyes for our March book club, and y'all, once I started this, I could not put it down, okay? It is a literal page turner. One of the things that Cindy said in the interview that really stuck out to me was that after sharing her story, she heard from so many people that were able to get out of situations because of, learning what they learned from Cindy, or being able to recognize the signs that they weren't in a good situation, or having the courage to finally make that decision. And I thought that was amazing, and I really commend her for doing that and speaking out. Not only do I appreciate Cindy for sharing her story, but I also appreciate her coming to the Sofa Squad to give even more insights. And I also appreciate Aphrodite Jones for taking the time to come talk to us as well as all the care that she puts into telling the victims' stories and keeping their memories preserved. Now, you're going to find links in the description box for Levi's Eyes, as well as Aphrodite's social media if you want to look into her other projects and all the other stuff that she's done. So all that being said, okay, go ahead, buckle your sofa seatbelts up, and let's dive into this interview. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, taking the time out of your busy schedules to talk about this amazing book and story, Levi's Eyes by Aphrodite Jones. Y'all, today we have Aphrodite Jones and Cindy Best. I could not put this book down. I could not walk away from this story. And first, I want to just obviously talk about who we have here today. Cindy, you are, and I said before we started, I'm so glad that you're here today to talk with us. I think you have an incredibly brave story and life that you lived. So if you could just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and then also if you want to go into, what it is that you would like people to know about, Levi, the victims yourself, that type thing.
Okay, yeah. So my name is Cindy. I grew up in the Finger Lakes. I was in New York. I was one of 8 children, so it was kind of crazy childhood, but the good kind where you're outside playing and going in the creeks and all of that. So it was, a pretty good childhood. And later in life, I ended up meeting Karl. He was very handsome. I was with my aunt, and we were at a dance club. So that's where we ended up meeting him and talking to him. And he was, very good conversationalist. He could keep the conversation going. As a matter of fact, on the first night that we met, he told me how he had lost his first wife in a fire, and he's trying to raise 3 kids on his own. And I really felt sorry for him. And it kind of just went from there. After that night, we started talking on the phone many nights, and then eventually led to us dating. And he seemed like a very good, concerned father, hands-on father, and that attracted me to him. And I had always wanted children myself, and had some issues in that department. But yeah, we just it went from there and kept going forward. And I eventually met his kids. There was Aaron, Levi, and Katie. Katie was so cute, the youngest one. When I first met her, she didn't have any front teeth. I thought she was the cutest thing, and she talked with a little lisp. Levi was kind of guarded, quiet and shy acting, he wasn't like really outgoing and bubbly. I mean, as time went on, he was, showed a little bit more, his silly, goofy side. And Erin was like seemed like she was a protector of the younger two. So she was, more mature than other girls her age, I think. So yeah, and it just kind of, blossomed from there. We ended up getting married early on, within 9 or 10 months of meeting Karl, we decided to get married. And then we decided to go through, well, let me get back to that. I did have a miscarriage during that time. I found out I was pregnant at one time, which totally shocked me. And I ended up losing that baby. But it kind of gave me hope that, maybe we could, try to do something else to add another child to the family. And we ended up going through in vitro fertilization, and that's how Alex came along. So Alex was adored by his siblings. They just loved him to death, and he loved them. So, and it seemed like him and Katie were the closest. I think maybe because they're the closest in age, although there was still like 9 years difference between Katie and Alex by the time we come along. And we just started a life with that. So, yeah, you want me to keep going on that, or?
Well, what we could do now is, listening to you talk about that, one thing that comes to my mind is dealing with personalities like Karl. I think one thing that people who haven't dealt with them or lived with them or survived them and whatnot is how, like you said, charming, they're good looking, and they can really pull you into that. And now on that note also, so Aphrodite, again, thank you for being here. I feel like I don't even need to introduce you. You are a victim's advocate, a best-selling true crime author, TV, you name it, you've done it. I have seen you at Crime Con
goddess.
Love that.
And so,
thank you.
and I'll see you. Are you going to be at the next year's Crime Con?
Probably, yeah.
Yay.
So on that note, so Aphrodite, could you also explain like what it was like? Because you had, access to Karl. You were, obviously working with Cindy. You had access to all the people in this story and this narrative. What was it like for you, your experience with that, with Karl, with writing the book?
So one of the things I have to say is, I've been writing books for 35 years, true crime books, and it's almost unprecedented to get constant access to a killer, especially before the trial. I mean, that's never happened before for me. I don't think for anyone. So Karl is a standout in that regard. As it happened, the way I got to Karl was through Cindy. So I had done an episode on my show, True Crime with Aphrodite Jones on ID, about the killing of Levi Karlsen, and we'll talk about it. But, his father admitted to causing the death of his biological son. And we went up to the Finger Lakes and I interviewed Cindy and other law enforcement from this story. And I always knew, as a writer will know, that fire that happened back 30 years prior, or at that time, 25 years prior, whatever it wasn't an accident. Doesn't happen that you killed your son and a wife died back in California in a burning house. So I was waiting for that other shoe to drop. And just at that point, Cindy and I got in touch because she wanted to write a book. I knew she wanted to write a book. She had a story to tell. If you think about it this way, imagine the Gilgo Beach killer, right? And imagine if you could gain access to his wife, who was living this life that was normal with him, as far as we know, right?
Yeah.
Or you can look at the BTK, another one in Wichita, who again was living a life that was quote unquote normal with, with his wife and kids. And to get inside that household and to get inside what went on and how it got developed and discovered is something that for me was like a dream come true, because it's very hard to do, very hard to get somebody who even wants to open up about it. And Cindy really wanted to tell her story. So I was lucky enough to be there when that happened.
I feel like too, it almost like be therapeutic in a sense, Cindy, to like sit here and just get this all out, because it was such a story. I mean, it was
Yeah,
just, page turner, if you will, like in regards to just reading it, but you lived through it. So,
right.
again, my hat's off to you in that way.
So it was, and at the same time, it was very cathartic, like, it just really helped me work through a lot of things. And, I appreciate Aphrodite being patient with me. But yeah, she's a good storyteller.
Well, and we got to know each other almost like sisters. I mean, we became best friends through this process for real. I mean, I think Cindy knows me and my writing sensibility more than anybody I've ever met, including my husband. It's just something I don't let people into. But in this case, what was so fantastic was interviewing Carl every day on the phone while he was sitting in jail, and then being able to talk to Cindy afterward and say, he says this and that. He's claiming he cared about Levi and took him to school every day or whatever it might be. And Cindy would say, oh, no, 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 no. I'm the one who took Levi to school. I'm the one, and things like this, where as just a little example of things that you're like, wait, okay. So I get a cross check, because normally when you're dealing with someone who's a killer and a pathological liar, you got to take what they say with a grain of salt, and you can't get a verification, right? But
Yeah.
in this case, in this story, I was able to do that. And it was, and hence the book is so rich, I suppose you would say, and at the same time flabbergasting when you see what Carl did and things he says.
And what was his demeanor like on those phone calls with him at jail? Was he friendly? Was he nice? Would you see that flash of anger ever?
I never saw a flash of anger ever from him. And that's an interesting question because I hadn't thought about it before. But no, there was never any anger, none. Instead, what I had was somebody who couldn't talk enough, couldn't. One of the things that I've learned to do in profiling a criminal such as Carl or any other murderer, if I had the chance, is to get into their childhood. And it's interesting when you get into that person's childhood, all the guards seem to go down. And now they're in a very emotional, vulnerable place. And once I continued to go there, now Carl was full steam ahead. He's going to tell me all about his life. And of course, throughout that, now you're getting all this weird stuff that he did as a kid, right? And I'm thinking to myself, wow, like here's a typical psychopath, So yeah, that's the kind of access I had. And it was I wouldn't say he ever got angry, but he did get sad. And you wonder, are these real? Is this real sadness?
That was going to be my question. Was it real
Yeah.
or was it?
Ask Cindy about that. She lived with him.
Yeah. So Cindy, what do you have to say on that? Because that's fascinating to me. What was that like for you?
Yeah. What were his tells
Well,
like when you could see that he was not being truthful?
well, oh my gosh, there was a lot, but he could turn on the crocodile tears and be very convincing about it. My life with him, he didn't, I knew he could have a temper, but he always seemed to keep it in check, and, the kids, if the kids did anything wrong, we always joked that he'd give the look and they'd know they crossed the line or anything like that. As far as what I saw, that's as far as it went.
But he also was a
Um,
big hypochondriac, right? Cindy, talk about how he was able to pull that sympathy out of his kids, out of you. I mean, how that went on.
yeah, he was a sympathy junkie, everything. I mean, towards the end, I was just so tired of all the, things that were wrong with him, all the surgeries. I mean, I think he ended up having like 7 back surgeries, and I'm not really even sure if any of them were warranted, maybe 1 or 2, but I think, he found a doctor that would perform surgeries on him. And not only the back surgeries, but other things would come up, he'd pull his shoulder out, or there was just so many that I couldn't even keep up with it. He even had a surgery at one point and had one of those it's like a battery pack that they put in your back, and it's like sort of like a TENS unit, but it's internal. And he was like one of the first ones that ever got that, so that was like bragging rights for him. But the thing is with that is he used it for a while, but then once nobody was giving him attention about it anymore, he never charged it and just let it sit in there, So
And pretended he was still using it and still in pain.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he
He
wouldn't even
sounds
charge the band.
exhausting.
Yeah, yes. As time went on, it was just exhausting. And at first, I'm like, I feel bad that all this has happened to him, but then it just seemed like almost one of those Munchausen by proxy things where he maybe even created some of his issues. I don't know. It was very exhausting to live with him at times. But then, Karl, again, he was a talker, he was a charmer, he was interesting to people, and people loved him. So it's not like I come into this and our whole life was him like this. It wasn't. It was we had good periods in our lives. We went to Disney with the kids and went on these little trips up into the mountains and stuff like that. And things were good. The one thing that I would say was the hardest thing for me is he had a hard time telling the truth. He was a pathological liar. He exaggerated a lot but he would put just enough truth into, something to make me question if, did that really happen? Or, must be it did happen that way, or to where I was confused all the time. I'd be confused.
And that's something I noticed, by the way, guys, in people who are psychotic, is that's a trait I've seen again and again, where they talk in circles, and they talk in so many circles that they basically have you confused unless you know what they did. I mean, in Karl's case, if I didn't know that he had been convicted of and admitted, he took a plea deal about causing his son's death, right? If I didn't know this, I would think this guy is the nicest guy in the world. It's but at the same time, like, where are we going with this? He tangent, rabbit hole, tangent. Very hard to keep him on topic,
right?
Because he likes to, unravel and re-ravel everything that's going on in his head. It's almost like a stream of consciousness, wouldn't you say, Cindy?
Yeah, and it was interesting, like when he was getting the story out there and laying it out, when he was in after the fire, and people were like, oh, well, I just noticed that maybe it's the drugs talking, but it was just
Right.
the contortion of everything. Yeah.
And that was something he was very good at. But, I think there's a part of Karl that was sadistic. And, we learned that later on, right, in the story when we start to see things that he does with animals. And, Cindy can kind of talk about, their family pets and, if you could, Cindy, give a couple examples of the hamsters Levi had and a couple other things like that, and special things you had, Christmas ornaments and things that just went awry early on.
Right. Yeah. So Levi they were guinea pigs. And the one thing that I had said, if we're getting guinea pigs, you have to be able to take care of them. It's your job, you have to take care of them. Well, it was always an argument, pulling back and forth, and they were messy. They stunk. So I told Karl that it was in the summertime. Take their cage out to the barn, and we'll deal with them there. And then Karl comes in one time and says that one of the horses backed up and stepped on the guinea pig's cage, and they died. No, I'm sorry. He had told me that they had just died. He didn't know what happened. He went out there and they were dead. But it was Levi who came to me later and said that didn't happen, that one of the horses backed up and stepped on them and, had crushed them. So what happened there is I think Karl didn't really put them in a spot where they'd be safe from the horses and just laid them on the floor. I didn't like to go out to the barn too much unless I absolutely had to, but yeah. So, and then we had another little Sheltie puppy that was a tire chaser. She just loved to chase the tires. And Karl was on the tractor one time with Alex and going up the lane. And next thing I know, he's coming down and tells me that he ran over Maggie, the dog, and killed her, the tractor. tired, he just seemed, oh, and one more really quick. There's more beyond this, but we also had a dog named Banjo, and he was a great dog, nicest dog, nice golden retriever lab mix. And he started getting sick towards the end. And I know I went to town one day and I got him a bone because I knew it was coming towards the end. And so I gave him the bone. And I don't know if anybody knows about animals or anything, but if they're on their deathbed, they don't eat. They don't, just like people, you don't eat, you don't want to nourish yourself. And on that same day, Karl said that Banjo had followed him out into the garage and laid down at his feet and died, so it's just things like that, I a lot of these things I'm never going to know the truth on, but he was just alive.
It's interesting. I was going to say, Cindy had recollections, and when you finally find out the truth about who you're married to or who your partner is, right? You start to now go back and question all the various things that happened. There was a kitty cat that once Cindy moved out of the house, the kitty cat got run over. Just a lot of stuff like this that in the time frame of years going by, they were married for 18 years. You don't necessarily, you don't want to think that the father of your son or your husband has done anything to kill animals, right? And Cindy certainly didn't think that. But now looking back, now she can see, geez, what do you think happened to those hamsters or guinea pigs or the cat or the family dog? And, it's things like that that are the tells. But unfortunately, those tells don't happen necessarily in the moment.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, Cindy, just what Aphrodite said, I imagine that this is going to be a lifetime of raking back over day to day. And when he said this and when he said that, how do you handle that? And have you had to come to what have you done to pick up those pieces of the what did this mean and what did that mean looking back over life?
Right. I think I've already gone through that process, but there was a lot of that, looking back and thinking, wondering why, questioning myself, why didn't I see it, then? I mean, now people hear the story and it's like blind, I was blind to it. But when it happens over time, it just seems normal, it, it wasn't like it happened all in 2 months. This happened, stretched out. So, but yeah, looking back on everything and realizing that wasn't the way that I thought it was. So just a lot of confusion.
When you said the confusion part, I feel like, people like Karl, that's where they keep you. Like Aphrodite was saying, if she didn't know the thing, they'd keep you doing that. What on a daily basis, and I know that there's ebbs and flows through life, you were married for 18 years and whatnot. On just a regular basis, what was it like? And I use this analogy a lot of times when we're looking at, these cases and whatnot can you imagine a simple daily argument with this personality type of who left the milk out on the counter, in a regular situation. Oh, I did. Let me put it back. But when you're oftentimes dealing with somebody like Karl or, whatever, this can dictate your whole day. Was it like that where you would be getting up in the morning, whatever y'all do, and it's like, what's going to set them off today? What rabbit hole are we going down today? On the bad days, I know there's often good times as well.
Right. Well, Karl was good at also hiding things a lot too. So I knew that there were certain things, I'd have to walk on eggshells, but honestly, I think he more looked to me to keep the family in order, and almost, well, I always said he was like my fifth child, because he needed to be told what to do. And, but he was also, he would get up in the morning and, well, before he was working at the glass factory, but he'd always get up and go do the farm chores. He was in his element on the farm. He loved it. And he was a hard worker. And then when he went to work at a glass factory, they loved him there. I mean, he excelled there. He was very smart when it came to the mechanics of everything. If they would have an issue with one of their, I don't know, we call it a jumbo something, a huge giant machine, and the engineers couldn't figure it out, they would call Karl in and he would figure it out for them. So, he liked that kind of attention, that he felt special in some way.
And
So,
also, he
but
was very smart, right? Because he got away with various incidents throughout his life, not just the murder of his first wife, Christina Carlson, which Cindy absolutely didn't think happened. Okay. But then the murder of his son, but also other incidents along the way that if you read the whole story, you will find it to be quite shocking that this man could get away with incident after incident, and big things, fires, what's going on, like who has this many fires in their life and accidents in their life, and yet he found a way, like Cindy says, to kind of wrap it around into a ball of confusion and somehow work his way out of any kind of culpability, and could make it believable.
They're like master salespeople. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like they can like sell a story. And Cindy, like you said, it would be one thing if all this happened in the first week of meeting him. You'd be like, oh yeah, no thanks, I'm out of here. This is over
right,
such a long span of time. And as everyone here knows, life happens. We have ups, downs, bad things, whatever. And so a lot
right,
of it's just like, okay, this is, oh, well, unfortunately the pet died this way or whatever. Yeah, but then
right.
also because of the way they can spin stories and keep you so exhausted and confused all the time, it's almost like you're just forced to go along with the Carl show for the day. Like, okay, this is where we're at. It's the Carl show. This week it's good. Next week it's this. And that's where when I read, your story and listening to it, I just really saw that right away where I was like, oh, there's no way. I mean, she wouldn't have seen this coming. This is a slow, methodical chipping away at you from every single direction, all the way from the very beginning of the sympathetic, oh well, this happened to me and my first wife, and oh goodness gracious, and
But I was
all of
able to
that.
save my children, hence I'm a hero. But I don't want to
Yeah.
take credit for that. I did what any father would do. So there was always that kind of like felt very real, right? And Cindy, that was one thing that really surprised me when you talked about it.
Yeah, it did seem very real. And another thing that he showed me early on was a newspaper article that was written about him in California, touting him as a hero, that he saved his children, but tragically lost his wife. And, so he was proud of that, like, at one hand, feel sorry for me. I lost my wife. I loved my life or my wife. We didn't never had any fights or, and he adored her. The way he talked to me about her, he adored her, so yeah, it's just
What
crazy, to think about all the things that, he was able to make me believe in the beginning. And it was hard for me to justify that he wasn't telling the truth. That's another thing, it's, he would exaggerate. Like, okay, let me give you an example. One of his prized horses, that you'll see in the book, was one of the horses that had died. But he always said that she weighed, like, she was the biggest mare in the United States, and he was like very proud of that, but her weight kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, depending on who he told. She weighed 3,200, and then no, she weighed 3,500. And I'm like, are you sure about that? And, he would just dismiss me, but, he would exaggerate about things like that too. He just very boastful, and he wanted sympathy and he wanted pats on the back.
And now on an example like that right there that you gave with the horse, what would he act like if you straight up called him out and were like, I'm kind of making this up, Carl, I just looked at the last vet visit with the horse and the horse is only 2,800 pounds. Would he retaliate against you for like a week over that? Like, what would that look like?
No, he would deflect and change the subject. He was very good at deflecting.
Pivot. That's what it was.
Yeah,
Let's talk about that beautiful couch over there.
yeah,
Let's talk about the peacocks that are roaming around on the property.
yeah.
This was
I mean,
Carl.
everybody can attest to that he would, go off in different tangents on, and start over on another conversation. It was exhausting, as you say.
And this is
Yeah,
why Cindy and Carl had so many fights as the marriage went on, because he continued to lie to her. And as you guys know, Levi was killed. Okay. And maybe your viewers and audience doesn't know that Cindy had no idea that Levi was murdered, because Carl set it up as an accident. And I think It's important for Cindy to talk about that because people think now you look back and say, how could she not have known this? I mean, what was she thinking? But he set it up.
Right. Yes, exactly. It was so easy. Well, I don't know. What happened that morning was we had to go to a funeral, at my aunt's funeral next town over. And Carl had a habit of disappearing all the time and me never knowing where he was, or he doesn't tell me where he's going. It used to be a constant fight with us because common courtesy, let me know where you're going and when you're going to be back. But that was a battle I never won, so I gave up on it. And he had left that morning and came back and told me Levi was coming to the house to work on the truck. And I said, okay, fine. And he was out there with Levi for a while. I know I had to call out to Carl and say, we need to get ready to go. And, so he come in, we got ready to go. I'm out in the car. We had like one of those remote starters. So I think, he had turned that on already and maybe already had the radio on in there so that when I was in there, it was warm because it was in November and I wouldn't hear anything. But at that time, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Carl said he was going out to tell Levi that we were leaving. And, he went out to the barn and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. He came back to the car at an appropriate amount of time. And we went to the funeral. He was the same old Carl. Nothing, seemed off about him. Nothing that would raise red flags. He was his usual self to everybody else, talking and, he makes jokes about himself all the time. And so it took me quite a long time to start putting two and two together. Now, for one thing, when we got back and we realized the truck had fallen on Levi and law enforcement came, the ambulances came, everything was, in my eyes, just, it was accidental. The police ruled it accidental. So there was no reason for me to believe otherwise. Levi's death certificate ended up saying he died at 3 p.m. We were gone from noon to 4. So, no red flags there. But it was after this that things kept happening that I started having thoughts. I would catch him in more lies. And, where he changed the story that, I started putting two and two together, or at least thinking about it, getting the thought process going. But the thing is, I could also justify why he couldn't have done it. We weren't home at 3:00 when he died. The death certificate said that he died at 3. We weren't home at 3, so he couldn't have done it. How could he have done it? Law enforcement ruled it an accident. So, if they thought it was anything fishy, they would have, done some investigating into it, and then when the insurance comes into play, which I found out after Levi died that he had insurance, the insurance company paid it right out. So, and they don't do that if they think there's anything wrong, so I had a lot of thoughts going in my head and I would have panic attacks, but then I would justify to myself that there's no way he could have done it, it just with all these variables, and it went on like that for a few months to where I was at the point where I couldn't sleep, I thought it was going crazy, so that's kind of where the PI came in. I hired him to try to look into California because I knew that his first wife, Christina's family, had blamed him for her death. I took that to mean that they were mad that he couldn't save her, that he didn't try enough to save her or something like that. And it was understandable grief, it's like, how, they're mad, they're upset, especially the mother was upset that, her daughter died and Carl couldn't save her. But then I started putting those thoughts together that, maybe there's more to that than what I know, so yeah, that's just kind of where the ball got rolling on that. And when the PI started finding things out, then I was actually starting to really be convinced that he did something, so yeah.
Yeah, that part there of that whole realization, when you started like kind of having those thoughts, and also, I mean, from my perspective, from my thought process, if I try and put myself in those shoes, for me, I'm like, I wouldn't want to think that my person
would do that. Most people don't, right? Even if you're dealing with, a Carl like personality, I would think the last thing in your mind is, oh, well, they did A, B, and C, because most people just don't think my husband or wife is, a murderer. So again, I can completely see how it's like, oh, well, this happened. Is it 3 o'clock? It was this, that. But when those first moments started sinking in of like wait a minute, I'm piecing this together. Like, what was it like at the having to put a face on and like, okay, we're going to go to bed. I'm going to go to sleep next to this person who, what was those moments like?
Well, that was a difficult part for me. I didn't get a lot of sleep those nights. I would always sleep with one foot touching him so I would know where he was.
Wow.
I kept, I had my black belt in Taekwondo, so I had nunchucks. So I kept them underneath my pillow or my mattress, had them right by where I could get to them easily. I had a pair of scissors hidden under I had a little dog that slept in a bed next to us. I had a pair of scissors hidden under there. Carl was a very strong man. And so I knew that it was going to be very hard for me if anything happened for me to try to get away. One of the things that I had learned in Taekwondo is to get away from your attacker is to poke their eyes out. So that seems very gory. And it was very hard for me to even think about doing, but I had to run through it in my mind because I think that was the only way I could have gotten away from him if he did attack. Then it got to the point where I could not, I wasn't sleeping. I could not do anything anymore. Then he started lying about the money and he's cashing out this money all the time. And the money isn't adding up to what it should have been. And, come to find out he was secretly, taking money out. And I used that as an excuse to put him in another room, get him in the guest room, move him in the guest room and tell him I'm mad about that. Things aren't adding up. You're lying to me about money and I don't know what it is, but blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, it was harder for me because I didn't know where he was, So, yeah, it was, one night I woke up, I smelled smoke, terrified. I went out and he was burning papers in a burning pile, and I'm like, okay, he must realize that I'm catching on to something, So it was very difficult during that time. I had to just keep pretending I'm an actress, and it was my job. That was my job to do.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, you did a good job at it because luckily you're here. That sounds so stressful. I cannot imagine.
Yeah.
That part where you said you had to keep your foot so you know where he's at. I'm just like, oh my gosh, but you got to do what you got to do, to
Right.
get through. And I think that you had to do that with him. I mean, just from my perspective of reading it, I'm like, oh yeah, he was capable of anything. I think if you had gotten in his way of any of those situations, like with the money and stuff you're talking about, you would have been next, period. End of story.
Right.
You know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, you can imagine what Cindy had to feel like when the private investigator, Steve Brown, informed her that there was over $1 million of annuities that had been purchased with the money from Levi's insurance. And Levi left all of his insurance money to his father alone, sole beneficiary, right? That money was supposed to be kept for his children, Levi's children, Carl's granddaughters. And instead it starts disappearing. And at some point, Cindy goes to a private investigator and said, what's going on here? Is that supposed to be taking the money out of this account? What's happening? And the PI says, well, you know what? He reinvested the money into annuities with death benefits. So if you were to die, Cindy, you'd be worth $1.2 million to him. I mean, think about what she had to go through in that moment and after she heard it.
Yeah, it was very difficult, then it really became real. I mean, I also had found out there was life insurance on my granddaughters, so Levi's daughters, so now I'm trying to keep us all alive, while trying to get enough evidence to, bring this to the police. And another thing is in the county where Carl lived, his family, they had, 6 boys and 1 girl. Finally, they got a girl, but they were very prominent in the community. Everybody knew the Karlsens, and, so I was worried about if anybody in the police department knew that something with a Karlsen, they would just look the other way, because I had seen before where favors had been done for the Karlsens, so that, was very difficult. So I had to work with a PI to get enough information and evidence to go to them where they couldn't say, we got, this is definitely something that we got to look into. So,
Yeah, that was one of my questions earlier. I was thinking, like, well, in the South, we call it the good old boys system, and that's how Alex Murdaugh got away with so many things. And he was like Teflon Alex. And it seemed like Aphrodite was saying earlier that it was like Teflon Karl. Like, how did you not put all of this? How did they not put all this stuff? So I was kind of wondering, like, where was people who caught on to things were clearly covering up some stuff, or had the potential to anyway. So that
Right.
answered that for me right there.
Yep. Yeah. So definitely in that county, that's, the way it was for the Carlsons.
He was slithering like a snake, but yet at the same time, he was the black sheep of the family. And he was happy to admit that. That's the other thing. And having the access to this person, this psychopath, he would tell you things and he'd be proud of it. I was the black sheep and nobody wanted me. And, think of that. And he was thrilled about weird stuff that you're like, what are you talking about? Like, and you're happy that animals died and this and that. I mean, it's shocking, really.
It was shocking to me, like, that his reaction when like only his brother and sister-in-law came to her funeral, but it was all like, what about me? Why are my parents here for me, but never about the kids. That was interesting.
Yeah, exactly. It was all about Karl a lot. I know I had questioned him why the kids didn't go to the memorial out there. And, he seemed kind of shocked that I would even ask that. And he was like, well, they were kind of too young to go. And I said, no, it was a memorial. Kids need closure. So maybe they never got any closure. And he just, blew it off. But, we know now the real reason is they didn't, he didn't want them there so somebody could ask any questions of what really happened. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Karl was somebody who really could make you believe that he was the most wonderful guy in the world. And some of the proof of that was when Cindy hired the private investigator, Steve Brown, and under the guise of he's coming in as a marketing expert for the duck business that Karl had started. And Karl was so excited. Oh, great, we're going to have a marketing person. And this Steve Brown goes to a slaughterhouse with Karl because he's thinking about expanding with his duck business. And Karl's in his element in the slaughterhouse with all the blood, to the point that Steve Brown told me, like he went to the bathroom and was vomiting over this. Like it was just, who is this man? But yet Steve Brown had wanted to go into business with him for real. And that's something that it's kind of hard to believe. He gets hired. He knows that the guy now has taken out insurance policies on his granddaughters. And, one of the things I couldn't believe, how does anybody take out insurance on their grandchildren? I didn't even know that was possible until this.
Me neither.
I mean, really, like I want to write an insurance policy on my 5-year-old granddaughter and my 7-year-old granddaughter, for $300,000 each. What?
Yeah.
And I think they would have been next. And one of the things that's so important in this story is to know that Cindy was made to be a villain by her stepdaughters, Levi's 2 sisters, Erin and Katie. She was made out to be a villain by Christina's sister, Colette Buisson. And all of this was because the money from the insurance policy that Karl got, sole beneficiary, $700,000, had dwindled to nothing. And they discovered that Cindy had taken part of that money and bought a house with it. Well, Cindy was told by Steve Brown, the investigator, that the private investigator, hey, you need to take care of yourself because this money, I'm working with Karl now. I've seen him in the slaughterhouse. I see what he's doing. He's desperate and you could be next. But in the meantime, he's just going to run through the money. He can't spend it fast enough. And so, Cindy tries to explain this to her stepdaughters, to the family, and they don't want to hear it. They're out there reporting that Cindy Karlsen had the life of Riley. She used the money from the life insurance policy to go on holidays and vacations and cruises. No, Cindy worked as a waitress Okay. Throughout all of this time, Cindy was trying to protect herself and her biological son, as well as her granddaughters. Her stepdaughters had already moved on and become adults. They were no longer in the house. They didn't really know what was going on in there, and they wanted to believe their father.
Mhm.
And even when their father was convicted of the murder of their mother, Christina, in 2020 in California, those two young women, his daughters, didn't have any concern about their father. The concern still remained Cindy took the money. That to me was the most mind blowing thing of this whole thing. One of them.
Not Cindy saved our lives or the lives of my nieces or whatever.
Right,
Right.
right. And the life and brought justice to Levi
Yeah.
and brought
exactly.
justice to the murder of Christina, which sat for 30 years unsolved. You know, how do you not understand that this woman, Cindy Carlson, at that time, who she was married to him, needs to protect herself?
Mhm.
And how do you not understand that your father ran through most of that money? So 3/4 of the $700,000 Carl had already spent. He was about to spend the rest of it, and Cindy was going to be next. How do you not see that?
Yeah.
It was mind blowing how fast he went through money. I mean, I thought I had bad spending habits, and I was like, whoa. And it just seemed that his pattern was just blow through money, whatever it was. It was the duck thing, the this, that, whatever it might have been at the time. And then up didn't work. And then the wheels, I guess, would start turning. He'd already laid the groundwork for the next whatever, which clearly you and your grandchildren were part of that foundation of the next thing, when the inevitably whatever was going wrong went wrong, it was the duck farm and whatnot. That part was so frustrating to read in regards to feeling frustrated for you. I was just like, wow. I mean, it's just one thing after the other for you, literally from start to finish.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I struggle with words sometimes. I look back at everything and I think, was that really my life? Did I live through all of that? And, it's just crazy that, you look and put it all together and realize what you lived through, what you went through. And, and it was a journey. It was a lot of healing I had to do after that too. And, it took quite a while, but, I feel like I've come out stronger. And as far as Carl with the spending and the money and the ducks, he became obsessed with these ducks. I mean, obsessed. I never saw anything like it. That's all he ever wanted to talk about to anybody, ever. He'd be on the phone talking for hours about these ducks to people. And, I think he had this idea that he was going to become rich and famous, by this duck business that's going to make him millions, But he just didn't know how to. He wasn't a businessman. He didn't know how to budget any money or anything like that. But he just became obsessed. That's when I realized this man is really, really, not the man that I thought I married. So, yeah.
And also in kind of, winding things down, I wanted to make note, it was brought up earlier about like your trips to Disney and things of that. You really, because you made that happen with yourself, doing your waitressing and the money and stuff like that. And I really admired learning that about you in this story, how much you made sure to make happen in that household for the kids, for the memory of their mother, for little moments like that, all while dealing with Carl. So I tip my hat to you for that. I really admired that.
Well, thank you. I made my mistakes along the way, just like anybody else, I guess. I tried my best with them. I feel good about that part of it anyway. So,
Yeah.
Carl always wanted to be the hero of every story, but you're the hero of this one. That's for sure.
oh, thank you. Yeah.
And Aphrodite, do you think on that what Shayna just said, do you think that Carl senses that and is maybe a little upset over that? Or is he still just the victim and that's the only hat he's wearing in this?
I'll give you a strange answer with Carl. So when I first had Cindy approach Carl via letter in his jail cell in California to introduce me to talk to this woman, Cindy was hesitant to want to write to him, but she did it because she needed to see if he'd cooperate and talk to me. And his letter back to her that she photocopied and sent to me was to the effect of, Cindy, I don't blame you at all. You have no blame in this. I'm here because of Levi, and you had nothing to do with it. I still love you, Cindy Sue, is what I believe he said to her. And what I couldn't believe was Cindy wore a wire and trapped him into making a confession. Okay. So, it wasn't like Cindy had a thought and then maybe said something to a PI. No, she finally went to the police with recordings and then was wired with detectives all around her in a restaurant and got him to partially confess to what he did, enough that he had to make a deal. And for him to later, all these years later, write to her in 2019, and this happened in 2008, he was put in prison in 2013. So
Yeah.
years later, to say to Cindy, I still love you and I don't blame you for anything. What?
Yeah.
It's like, what did he want? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
That's my first thought. What was he trying to manipulate out of you?
Well, he
Yeah.
did try to manipulate her, right, Cindy? What was it that he wanted at the end?
Oh my gosh, he wanted me to help him because he was in the field. So he wanted me to get addresses for people that he needed to send letters to so he can appeal his conviction, and trying to convince me that he didn't do it. After all this confession and all of that, he's trying to say, I wouldn't do that. And it just, I don't know.
Mind blowing.
Yeah, yeah. I never really answered his letters. I would send them to Aphrodite, and they basically stopped. I think I got one maybe a year ago from him, just again wanting me to help him with his appeal or whatever. It's crazy.
It's
They
absolutely insane. And then after I wrote this book, I don't know if Karl got a hold of it or not. I mean, it's easy to say you can send a book to a prison, and he's back in the New York prison now, finishing out his sentence for the murder of Levi. I got a birthday card from him last November. A beautiful card. I have the card.
I'm like, did he get it at he got it at the prison commissary?
I have no idea, because it was one of those cards that had an extra layer of kind of cellophane on top of it that was fancy. And I'm like, what? And he's wishing me a happy. He wrote a whole thing that was funny, right, Jana? I mean,
Oh my
really?
God, that's hilarious.
That is wild.
I
Now
was
I'd be
gonna
curious
ask
to know if you get one next year.
Yeah.
I was like curious, like if you had a sense of how he was doing in prison. Like, does he get a lot of shots or whatever they're called? Like, does he get in trouble a lot? Because we always like to follow up with some of our criminals, like Sarah Boone and Donna Adelson.
Yeah.
with their
Well,
wackadoos.
I can tell you with Karl, I'd rather not follow up.
Yeah.
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 I've had a fill.
You had enough Karl. Cindy, I'm sure you've had enough Karl for a lifetime.
Oh my God.
For sure.
The
My
2
goodness.
hours worth of
I'm sorry, go ahead.
the
Jana.
2 hours worth of the interrogation of the 9-hour interrogation that I watched was exhausting.
It's
Yeah,
exhausting.
yeah.
He's exhausting. And also, though, when you're in that kind of a presence, and I will say this, I could feel the demonic sensibility there. I could feel it. And I would close myself off into a separate room and literally pull all the blinds down and be in darkness when I was talking to him, because I needed to separate myself out from those conversations to having a real life when those conversations ended for that day. And I couldn't have been happier when I started writing finally to never take a call from him again. And I never did. So doesn't he get it? No, he sends me
Apparently
birthday
not.
cards.
Oh my goodness.
Do you
But
have,
I also
do you have dreams about him? Is he still in your subconscious or anything? Because I still dream about Alex Murdoch, and I would prefer not to.
I do not dream about any of the people I've written books about. And this started a very long time ago when I wrote Cruel Sacrifice, which is a story that, if you haven't read, is probably my biggest New York Times bestseller. And it is a horrific murder story about 4 teenage girls that killed a 12-year-old. A crazy, crazy story. And at that time, I was so filled with drama and nightmares and horror. And I mean, I couldn't get through it. And I realized, okay, I'm here to make a difference. I'm here to bring light to a dark subject. I'm here to find a way to make the world a safer place, to give catharsis to these victims. And this is my purpose. My purpose is not to get down into the rabbit hole of that kind of darkness and evil beings. And so I made that decision. You're cutting it off. When
Yeah.
you're not writing, when you're not in the interviews, that is no longer your life. You move over here in Florida and go out boating and go swimming and do your workouts and have a good time because life's too short. And I couldn't survive, frankly. You know what it's like, guys, when you're doing all
Yeah.
these monster
Oh,
stories.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, I'm such a shallow dreamer, though. Somebody could say something in passing to me, and I will have some sort of dream about that one sentence later. It's like, why my complex thoughts happen while I'm awake? Certainly not while I'm asleep.
I wanted to say on that note with what you're talking about with your mission, why you're here and whatnot. So many of the viewers, when I was asking them, telling them we were going to be doing the interview, they all brought that up. And also obviously my experience with your content, whether it's TV shows, books, whatnot. You do such a wonderful job of keeping victim stories alive and their history and their names, because so many of them obviously are just stolen from earth way too soon. And I love the way that you bring them to life for people who, like, I never knew Levi, but I feel like I did in a sense now. And I think you do a great job with it. And I think you do such a wonderful job at helping everyone get their stories out, like Cindy, and just all the things you do. So I'm greatly appreciative of how you tell your stories and your attention to the victims and their lives and their short journeys here on earth.
Thank you. And I'm greatly appreciative of you guys having Cindy and I on your show today because
great.
it means the world to us.
Yeah. I appreciate y'all taking the time, and Cindy for your bravery and for coming to talk even here on this and having to, relive it and answer the questions. It really means a lot.
Yeah, well, let me just say one thing on that point is I have been contacted throughout the years, and I've had people, women mostly, contact me and say that by reading my story, or hearing my story, that they recognize something in their significant other or whatever, and that it helped them make the decision that they wanted to leave. So that to me means a lot to me. That's helped me tremendously. And then just the fact that
Marcia's birthday is Monday, so I got her a copy of Levi's Eyes and sent it to her.
Okay.
So
good,
then I will
yeah.
take it back from her when I go down there, when I see her later, so that you can sign it in at CrimeCon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The book that there's just not enough time to tell all the stories, and there's more stories that I had about Karl that you obviously can't put into a book, the whole book, because it's just impossible. There's so much to talk about, but I think people will like reading the book. Like you said, it was hard to put down, and I think Aphrodite, like you said, did a very good job of making that possible. Oh yeah, I got mine too.
Here we go. Here he is.
Yeah.
Yay.
And Cindy supplied that picture, and I don't know
Oh,
if
you
you guys are
did.
seeing that
Perfect
picture of
picture.
Levi. What a fantastic picture of his eyes and what that kid
Mhm.
was thinking
Yeah.
as a child, as a boy. And
Yeah.
clearly you find that out at the end of the story. And I think that's the ultimate shocker, right?
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
We're going to see
Absolutely.
that one.
I was impressed
Absolutely. Yeah,
that
for sure.
Piers Morgan that I agreed with him. That was a fascinating interview to watch him with Karl. Did you see that yet, Paul?
Not yet. No, I haven't seen
Man,
that one.
that was good. I don't really agree with Piers on much these days, but he's like, I don't believe you, Karl.
No, Pierce had no mercy. No mercy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think what you're saying is a bunch of bullshit. If I recall, right? Did he say that?
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God, Pierce, you're English, you're British. No British people curse like that. He did.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank y'all once again. This has been, I could literally just sit here and like clear my cat and talk to y'all about this and your life, Cindy, for like the rest of the day and the week. So I appreciate you coming and again sharing this. Aphrodite, thank you. I know you're super busy doing stuff. This was awesome to be able to pick your brain about everything with the case and other things and whatnot. And like I said, I'm eager to continue on following you on all the things that you do.
Thank you.
I
Thank you
can't wait
so
to see
much.
what you have up your sleeve next.
I got
know.
some things up there, believe me. I'm working. Always working.
Yeah, Paul and I have a little something up our sleeve too. Hopefully she'll be in court soon.
Okay, good. Good. Awesome.
Sofa Squad, again, be sure to check out Levi's Eyes. I'll put all the stuff down in the description below. And it was amazing. Again, thank you everybody for joining today. This was awesome. And we will talk to you, Sofa Squad, on the next video. I hope y'all enjoyed this and we will all talk soon. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Aphrodite. And thank you, Shayna. We'll see you soon.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now, don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. And then, like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Roscoe on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.